Imagine, for a moment, that it is the 14th of April, 1912, and you are a passenger on the most famous ship in the world. It is almost midnight. Your cabin is warm. Somewhere above you, music is still playing. And then you notice something small, something wrong. A thin line of dark water sliding silently under your cabin door. You open it, and the corridor is not a corridor anymore. It is a river. Ice-cold Atlantic water climbing the carpet, lights flickering along a hallway that is beginning, very slowly, to lean. 2,300 people are aboard this ship. There are lifeboats for barely half of them. In 2 hours and 40 minutes, everything around you will be gone, and the finest vessel ever built will fall 2.5 miles into the dark, carrying some 1,500 people with it. You know this story. Everyone knows this story. It may be the most famous night of the 20th century. But here is what almost no one knows. When the Titanic disappeared beneath the Atlantic, it stayed lost. Completely, utterly lost, for 73 years. And when she finally was found, in September 1985, the world was told a simple story. A brilliant scientist, a research ship, a lucky break. That story was a cover. The expedition that found the Titanic was not looking for the Titanic. It was a classified United States Navy operation, hunting for something else on the bottom of the Atlantic. Two things the public was never supposed to know about. The truth stayed secret for over 20 years. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what the Navy sent Robert Ballard down there to find. First, understand why the Titanic stayed lost for so long. Because it was not for lack of trying. The wreck lies about 370 miles off the coast of Newfoundland, in water nearly 4 kilometers deep. That depth is hard to imagine. It is beyond sunlight, beyond divers, beyond almost every technology of the 20th century. The pressure down there is measured in tons per square inch, and the searchers didn't even know exactly where to look. The ship's final distress positions, radioed in panic in 1912, turned out to be miles off. The Titanic was a needle in a haystack, except the haystack was pitch black, freezing, and the size of a small country. People tried anyway. From the 1980s on, expeditions went out with sonar and money and big promises. Most famously, a Texas oil millionaire named Jack Grimm, who mounted 3 separate expeditions between 1980 and 1983. He brought experts, ships, sonar. At one point, he also brought, reportedly, a monkey trained to point at the map. The scientists objected to the monkey. The expeditions found nothing. Season after season, the most famous shipwreck on Earth simply refused to be found. And here is where the story splits in two. Because while treasure hunters were dragging sonar across the Atlantic, a young oceanographer at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution named Robert Ballard wanted to find the Titanic for a different reason, to prove a new technology. A deep-sea robot camera sled called Argo, able to drift above the seabed and send back live video from miles down. There was just one problem. That kind of technology costs a fortune, and no science budget was going to pay for a Titanic hunt. But Ballard knew someone with deep pockets and a deep ocean problem: the United States Navy. To understand what the Navy wanted, you have to go back to two of the darkest days in American submarine history. April 10, 1963. The USS Thresher, the most advanced nuclear attack submarine of its day, is running deep diving tests east of Cape Cod. Something goes wrong. A garbled message reaches the escort ship above. Then the sounds of a submarine breaking apart. 129 men die in seconds. Thresher falls to the bottom in pieces, 2.5 kilometers down, taking her nuclear reactor with her. 5 years later, May 1968, the USS Scorpion, another nuclear attack sub, is crossing the Atlantic home to Norfolk, Virginia. She never arrives. 99 men gone. When the wreck is eventually located, she is lying more than 3 kilometers deep, 400 miles southwest of the Azores. To this day, the cause of her loss has never been officially settled, and Scorpion went down carrying more than her crew. Aboard were 2 nuclear torpedoes. So by the 1980s, the U.S. Navy had 2 shattered submarines on the Atlantic floor, 2 nuclear reactors, and nuclear weapons. sitting in the dark at the height of the Cold War. The Navy wanted to know what condition they were in. Were the reactors leaking radiation into the sea? What had really happened to Scorpion? And there was a quieter worry, never advertised, making sure the Soviets hadn't been poking around the wrecks. But surveying lost nuclear submarines is not something you announce. If the Navy openly sent ships to hover over Thresher and Scorpion, every Soviet intelligence officer and every journalist would ask what they were looking at and where and why. What the Navy needed was a reason to be out there, a story so big, so shiny, so irresistible that nobody would think to ask a single question. They needed the Titanic. In 1982, Ballard walked into the office of the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Submarine Warfare, Ronald Thunman, and asked the Navy to fund his deep-sea camera technology to find the Titanic. The Admiral's response, as Ballard later told it, was blunt. The Navy wasn't going to spend that kind of money on a luxury liner, but they would fund the technology for a classified job. The deal was struck, and it stayed secret for decades. The Navy would finance Argo and the expedition. In exchange, Ballard would first survey the wrecks of Thresher and Scorpion, map them, photograph them, check the reactors. The Titanic hunt would be the cover story, and there was a catch that made it very real. Only if he finished the classified work would he be allowed to spend whatever time was left looking for the liner. The Navy, by Ballard's own account, never actually expected him to find it. Through the summer of 1985, Ballard did the secret work. Thresher first, then Scorpion. And down there, staring at the debris of the submarines, he noticed something that would change everything. Both subs had not simply sunk. They had imploded and shredded, scattering a long trail of debris down current across the seabed. A heavy wreck doesn't land in one neat piece. It rains. That observation became his strategy. Don't hunt the Titanic. Hunt her debris trail. A ship that size, breaking up on the way down, would have scattered a path of objects far wider than the hull itself. Instead of mowing the ocean with sonar looking for one shape, Argo would sweep across the currents, looking for anything man-made, and then follow the trail like footprints. By the time the classified survey was done, Ballard had 12 days left. 12 days for a wreck 3 expeditions and 73 years had failed to find. On the night of September 1st, 1985, at 12:48 in the morning, the video feed from Argo, drifting through absolute blackness, picked up something. Wreckage. Then, minutes later, a shape rolled onto the screens that every person in that control room recognized instantly. A ship's boiler, identical to the photographs from 1912. The room erupted. Someone glanced at the clock, and the celebration stopped. It was almost 2:20 a.m., nearly the exact minute the Titanic had gone under, 73 years before. The crew fell quiet and held a small memorial on the fantail for the 1,500 dead they had just found. The next morning, the discovery was world news, a triumph of science, a brilliant oceanographer, a clever robot, a lucky break in the final days of an expedition. Every word of it true, and all of it, together, a cover story. Nobody asked what Ballard's ships had been doing all those earlier weeks at sea. Nobody asked why the United States Navy had quietly bankrolled a hunt for a civilian shipwreck. The Titanic was so famous, so luminous, that she blinded everyone to the mission around her, which is exactly what she had been chosen to do. The find, Ballard would later admit, actually worried the Navy. All that attention, hovering one story away from 2 of its most sensitive secrets. But the story held. The reactors, the surveys, the nuclear torpedoes off the Azores, none of it reached the public. The secret lasted into the 2000s. Only then was the military side of the 1985 expedition declassified, and Ballard finally allowed to say out loud what he had really been doing down there. The man who found the Titanic had spent most of that summer photographing dead submarines, and the greatest discovery in the history of ocean exploration had been, on paper, the side project. There is one more layer, and it is the quietest one. The families of the 228 men lost on Thresher and Scorpion spent those same decades asking questions about what happened, about what was found, about what the water was slowly doing to the wrecks. For years, the answers were classified too. The cover story protected the mission. It also, for a long time, covered the graves. Today, the Titanic is the most studied shipwreck on Earth. Mapped, filmed, visited, mourned. The submarines are still down there, still monitored, their full files still not entirely open. The most famous discovery of the 20th century was real. It just wasn't the mission.